Hello, welcome to the 2022 Issaquah Candidate Forum hosted by the Kiwanis Club of Issaquah, the Issaquah branch of the American Association of University Women, or AAUW, and the City of Issaquah. I'm Nina Milligan, and with me is Judy Rogers, and we are the moderators for tonight. Over the next 2 hours, you will hear from 8 candidates for state representative from the 41st Legislative District and the 5th Legislative District. Both legislative districts represent Issaquah in the state legislature. In between these two sets of legislative district candidates, you will also hear from 2 candidates from the King County District Northeast Division Judge District twice, well, that's all right, that serves Issaquah and the adjacent communities.
For each set of candidates, the forum will begin with 2-minute opening statements from the candidates, followed by questions. During the question and answer period, each candidate will have 1 minute for responses and a 30-second optional rebuttal from the first responder. Our timer, Kathleen Friedman, is seated in the front row and will raise a warning when 15 seconds remain and a stop signal when time is up.
And I might ad lib here, Judy, that we have reserved the right to interrupt you if you don't stop at your time. Right?
Yes.
We will. Questions have been formulated by an organizing committee and gathered from our community. If an answer needs further clarification, we may ask a follow-up question. Throughout the forum, we will rotate the first responders to the question so that everyone has an opportunity to be first and everyone has an opportunity to be last.
The last question for each set of candidates will come from the opposed candidates themselves. Each candidate will get an opportunity to ask their challenger a question.
At this time, I want to remind everyone in the audience and those of you on the dais to please silence your phones. And then I'm going to give just a friendly reminder to the audience that this is Issaquah and we're all friendly folks, and so we're not going to respond to any of the answers that the candidates give or the rebuttals. We're just going to kindly and quietly listen. So let's get started. Our first set of candidates are seeking to represent the 41st District in the state legislature, and the candidates for position 1 are Tana Sen and Mike Nickram, and for position 2, Milan Tai and Al Rosenthal. In order to keep the forum as friendly as possible, as we do here in Issaquah, we are going to be using your first names only tonight. We'll begin with the 2-minute opening statements. Kathy's our timer here, and we're going to go from Tana to Mike to Milan to Al. So with that, Tana, you may begin.
Good evening. Thank you, Nina, Judy, Kathleen, AAUW, Kiwanis, the City of Issaquah and the Issaquah community for having me tonight and all of us tonight. I have the honor of serving as your state representative currently. I first got into politics when there was a road safety issue in my community, and I did not like how the all 7 white males were deciding that issue. So I got involved, wanted to make sure that we were focused on safety and on families using that road instead of just a commute issue that was slowing traffic down by 30 seconds. When they decided to do the road diet but not fund it, it put my hair on fire. That was not good governance. So I got involved and became a Mercer Island City Council member and then joined the state legislature. I have been focused on making life easier for busy families, particularly focusing on childcare affordability and access, making sure that we fund our schools, have better access to mental health, particularly children's mental health, that we are protecting the environment and reducing gun violence, and also making sure that our economy is working for everyone. I have the honor of serving as the chair of the Children, Youth, and Families Committee and serving on the local government committee as I represent Issaquah and 4 other cities, 5 school districts, 2 lakes, a college, and our beautiful 41st Legislative District. I also serve on the board of HopeLink and as the co-president of the National Association of Jewish Legislators. It would be a great honor to return to Olympia to continue to serve Issaquah and our 41st District. Thank you.
Thank you, Tana. And we will go to Mike now.
Mike Nickram here. 2 minutes went fast, huh? That, huh? Okay. Mike Nickram here. 2 minutes went fast. I reflect on the year 2003 when my wife and I sat up in Husky Stadium and were able to watch our oldest daughter on that day become the 5th generation of women to graduate from the University of Washington. And she became the 7th member of our family to let her in varsity sports at Washington. I appreciated her a little bit of football. My father played football. I got an uncle who rowed in the 60 Olympics, another uncle who rowed in the 36 Olympics, boys in the boat. And what we're most proud of is our 2 great aunties who 110 years ago were in the first intercollegiate athletic program for women at the University of Washington. We have a long history of foundational history here at Washington. Community involvement. I've been a 33 member of the Kiwanis. Thank you, Kiwanis, for sponsoring this. My great-grandfather, double great-grandfather, homesteaded Gig Harbor. My grandfather developed most university district. My grandparents were profs at Washington. My mom helped support me through Washington, and I got my degree in construction management, and I literally built the 41st. I built homes, plats, subdivisions in every single city in the 41st. My first home on Mercer Island, 1976. Consequently, we raised our family in downtown Kirkland, and Lori and I now live in her family's legacy home that was built for them in the mid-60s in Newport Hills. During that period of time, I've been very active in the chambers, Kirkland Kiwanis, Knights of Columbus, and I currently serve as national representative, National Association of Home Builders, and I'm the one that we look for nationwide to help try and resolve housing issues across our nation. So I'm here, hope to represent you on foundational issues, on where we started in Washington and where we can go in the future.
Thank you, Mike. And now we'll go to Milan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for organizing and the opportunities for us to share with you who we are and how we, what we've been doing and how we could better represent you. My name is Milin Tai. I have the honor to serve as your state representative in the last 4 years. I first get elected in the position as school board director. As I often say, when you have children, your directions in life change. Is all focused on the kids. And really through them, I get to meet so many other families and so many other children that are in our public education system. That was an opportunity for me to build my passions and knowledge, really, in education as a whole. Personally, I and my family came to the United States in 1983 as refugee from Vietnam and graduated high school here, went on and earned a degree in pharmacy at the University of Washington. So as you can guess, my other passion is in healthcare. So those are the 2 areas that I am currently focusing on beside human rights, civil rights, and our environment. So while in the last 4 years in the state legislature, I have the honor to serve in multiple different committees, including education, healthcare, civil rights judiciary, housing, public safety, and currently I have an opportunity to serve as the caucus vice chair, taking care of and ensuring that the caucus hear from every single Washingtonian across the state without losing my focus on what's important to the 41st. Thank you.
Thank you, Milan. And finally to Al.
Thank you. Milin Tai, why did you vote for House Bill 1054? It totally prohibits the police from chasing someone that steals a car. Thanks to your voting for that bill, car theft is double what it was before the bill. And in addition to that, Section 7DI, if a police officer sees a violent act being committed, which he's allowed to chase for, something like a murder, he has to call for supervision permission first before he can chase. What was the purpose of that? To give a head start to the criminal? Why did you vote for the change in the Washington state drug law that changes hard drug from a felony to a misdemeanor? And you have to be caught 3 times before there's any penalty at all. All the legislature had to do to keep it a felony was change possession to possession and knowledge, and it would have stayed a felony. Even Jay Inslee thought that was a good idea. In this state, jaywalking is a bigger offense than the first 2 times you're caught with heroin. You're killing the homeless drug addicted by not forcing them into treatment. You let them live in the streets, take drugs, and die. Do you really think that's compassion? I may sound angry. I am, because you're killing people with these bad laws. These bad laws need to be fixed. Let's hear more than your usual say-nothing word salad for the rest of the night. You'll never hear a say-nothing word salad from me.
Thank you, Al. I just wanted to remind before I turned over to Judy for the first question that each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question. The first person, then the second person, and then if there is a rebuttal by the original question answerer, they have only 30 seconds. Kathy is your timer. You've already been well trained. I see you looking at her. So with that, Judy, would you like to start with the first question?
Yes. So I just want to remind each candidate will have an opportunity to respond to the same question. This is the order in which people will then respond to the question. After I read the question, Tana, Mike, and then an opportunity for the rebuttal, and then it will be Meilin, Al, and then Meilin, you will have an opportunity for rebuttal. So here is the first question. What role does the legislature have in determining school curriculums?
Thanks for that question. In Washington State, we have local control. We have 295 school districts across the state, and the local school boards get to determine the curriculum. Having said that, I think we as a legislature certainly create guidelines and goals and requirements for graduation. I fully support the laws that we have passed recently to ensure and encourage the teaching of, for instance, Holocaust education, for science-based sex education, on providing funds to develop Native American history curriculum, and I think it's important to leave it up to local control as long as that it's very open to discussion and, again, is science and fact-based.
So just roll right into me. Okay, Mike Nickram here. The role the state legislature should have is really to set a basic level of education and make sure there's parental review before any changes are made. Unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing here, especially here in Issaquah School District as of recently. We have frankly, some very horrendous issues starting to take place in our school district, and the parents are incredibly concerned. I had a close friend of mine, Dr. Wendy Giora, that's a doctor in education, ran for school board a year ago, and we had quite a bit of issues, very popular. Very strangely, votes changed about a week after the election results came in, and frankly, a left-wing public employee-supported teacher took her place, and the voice of the parents, consequentially, are not being heard today.
Donna?
So you just roll right into the response. Set.
Yep.
No, shut this off.
No rebuttal? Okay. All right then, Meilin?
Thank you for the question. I want to say I agree with my seatmate representative, San or Tana, should call each other by first name, my apology, is that the role of the legislator is really to set standards and clearly articulating what do we see as basic education and what guide us really is the number one, ensuring that our youth are ready for the 21st century educations out there and being able to compete in multiple areas of opportunities at the same time, ensuring that they will find their passions, wherever their passions would lead them, that our education system should be there, not only providing the opportunity, but providing the support to ensure their success. It is at the school district, school board level, looking at policy and the school district setting up process of how curriculum is being vetted and engaged with community for that purpose.
Al?
Our schools must excel in math, science, reading and writing, the most important subjects that they have. We should have charter schools, private schools with vouchers. You would never want to have only a government-run grocery store. The prices would be high, the quality would be low. We want competition in our schools. That will improve our kids' education. The only thing not having competition does, it hurts their education.
Rebuttal?
It's not a rebuttal, but I just want to make sure that the public do know that in Washington State, by the definition of common school, charter school is in that space, and we do have vibrant private schools available in our state as well.
All right, thank you. And then Nina, question number
Thank you,
two.
Judy. Great. So for question number 2, the order will be Mike, then Tana, and then Mike can rebut. Al, then me, Lynn, and then Al can rebut. So question number 2 is, now that the Supreme Court of the United States placed abortion regulations with the states, what should the Washington State Legislature do? So the first person to answer is Mike.
You know, there's 3 people involved when a child is conceived. And unfortunately, the discussion has been largely around 2, the child, the mother. I want to take this conversation to a higher level, and that's the person, the man, that started the whole process. Now, I'm an employer. I've signed a face of thousands of paychecks, all right? And it really ticks me off when it takes our state government months and months before I get a notice of garnishment so I can see to it that my employee steps up to his responsibility. That is not happening in this state. This state needs to get to an E-Verify system of employment, and that way, whatever responsibilities that are court ordered for a man's responsibilities for starting this process is engaged far sooner. And I'd love to expand on that issue more, seeing to it that men are responsible for the children that they have created. Thank you.
Tana?
So I just want to point out that Mike did not answer the question, and I think all of us would like to know if he supports a woman's right to choose and to have control over her body. I would be very clear about that, as I think absolutely a woman has the right to control her own body and to make decisions that are good for her and her family with whatever consultation she would like to have. In Washington State, we currently have laws on the books that allow women to do that, and I think it continues to be important that we fund reproductive health services and that we welcome people from other states if they are not able to receive the health care that they need in this area as well.
Mike, do you have a response?
Yeah, I like to tell people all the time that I'm pro-choice, but I choose life. And if elected, if you could trust the election system for that matter, I would only pursue a policy where we protect the lives in all cases and the formation of a solid family, protect the child, yes, from conception, all the way through birth and all the way through life, and making sure that everybody becomes a part of that whole process, including, like I said, the men who started the process.
Thank you. Al is next.
Yes, I totally support our current abortion law. You're allowed to have an abortion up to viability. After that, if the mother's life is in danger, you can have an abortion. The one problem is viability is vague. They should put an exact number of weeks. Viability, if you go to 100 doctors, they're not going to all give you the same answer. The other thing I would say is in the third trimester, where I would not want to see an abortion, even if the mother's life is in danger in the latter part of the third trimester, say where there's a 95% of the child being born completely normal physically and mentally, no abortion, cesarean section, because then you're killing a life when you do it at that point.
Thank you. Milin?
Thank you for the question. I must say that each and every one of us, and I myself, definitely am very proud to live in Washington State, the state that passed initiative by the people to ensure that abortion care and reproductive rights are available to everyone. As your state representative, I too have the honor of the last session to sponsor legislation to increase access to these services, and through allowing providers who are trained and have the appropriate credential to provide the services for all those who need the service, all the pregnant people who need the service. What we are going to be doing next is to ensure that the providers who provide these services are protected in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. Al, do you have a response?
You know, there are some people that want no abortion from day one. And there are some people, like I think Maylene Tai, but she's never commented on it, would be good with abortion till the day before. I really don't agree with either, but I would side with the person that would not allow it from day one, because an abortion on the last day, that's murder. And Maylene Tai has never said she's against that in all the times I've been with her and spoke with her.
For our next question, the order will be Milin, Al, and then a rebuttal, and then it will be Tana, Mike, and then a rebuttal. This question comes from the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Our state has taken significant steps to improve crisis response, yet continues to fall behind on services that keep people from getting to crisis in the first place. How will you prioritize prevention and early intervention services? Milin?
Thank you very much for the questions. I have the honor and the opportunity to serve as co-chair for the work group specifically looking at mental behavioral health services and suicide prevention for our K-12, kindergarten through 12 school system. And in that subgroup, we get to hear reports from all of the crisis response that you have mentioned, and really hearing the sharing of what worked and what needed to improve. And I am so proud to share with you that we are about to propose a slate of legislations moving forward, including budget proviso to ensure that the workforce are being created, and not only just created workforce, but workforce who serve the people who needed them the most.
Al?
Yes, we need to treat people that are mentally ill. But the other thing we need to look at is how much is drug use affecting mental illness? A lot of the people out in the street that are mentally ill, they may be that way because of drug use. Fentanyl went from 5,000 deaths in the country in 2015 to 76,000 deaths last year. Overall, OD deaths were 107,000. Actually, that was more than what we got from COVID back in May per day. Drug deaths were higher than COVID in May, and nobody talks about it. Milan Tai, she wants to make hard drugs just a misdemeanor, and on the third time, we'll have some kind of prosecution. We need to stop the drug use. That's a big part of the mental illness.
Milan, do you have a rebuttal?
I don't. I just want to take this opportunity to continue. What I wanted to share is I would like to invite you to engage in this conversation. We are looking for parents and students and youth who needed these services, who've been reaching out and trying to get the services to share with us what have worked for them and what the state needed to do more. And if you don't have the resources how to get there, please reach out to me, and I'd love to engage you. Thank you very much.
Tana?
Thank you. So mental health is a critical issue for our communities, and a lot of our adult mental health issues actually develop when people are young. And I have been focusing on the issue of children's mental health through my time in the legislature, from increasing social emotional learning in our schools. We just passed increases to mental health counselors. And last year we started an infant and childhood mental health consultation system for childcare to help prevent kids from being kicked out, and giving skills to childcare providers to deal with behaviors of children. Also, I serve on the board of UW's Applied Child and Adolescent Psychology Program, which trains people in child and adolescent psychology. And we definitely need more people in that specialty, and I look forward to continue to expand that.
Mike?
Mental illness touches us all. My great uncle was incarcerated most of his life after a brilliant career as a physicist at the University of Washington up in Cedar Woolley. My own brother got touched on this, and unfortunately he has mostly recovered, but he sits on the board of directors of NAMI at the University of Washington. Today, we let our mentally ill and people who need our help, they're scattered about our streets, our freeways, they're involved in drugs, and they have no care. We've poured millions of dollars of this without results. You need, frankly, a business-oriented person, or a person like myself, with foundational structure here in this state. We need to aggressively go after those who are especially in our streets. They're largely dealing with mental illness, give them the care, the help they need, and help them recover, and especially recover from their drug addiction. And I'm sure, Tony, you probably don't have a rebuttal, do you? Right? Because we got to get it together on this. Thank you.
Right. Tana, do you have a rebuttal or
Thank you.
more
Well, I
comments?
don't have a rebuttal. I have more comments. I do want to say that, especially with COVID, our kids are really struggling with mental health. We see that increasingly across our state. And I just want to applaud the Issaquah schools, and they have been very creative in working with Swedish and bringing in mental health counselors for years now. And those are the kind of models that we need to increase to make sure that there's more access to mental health for our youth.
Thank you. We'll move on to question number 4, where we will start with Al, go to Lynn, and then come back to Al for a rebuttal if he likes it, Mike, then Tana, back to Mike for a rebuttal. Question number 4. Many police departments, including Issaquah's, have recently integrated behavioral health scientists, behavioral specialists into the crisis response work. Should this state either support or restrict this kind of policing reconfiguration? And again, we're starting with Al.
You can have mental health specialists help the police, but in no way should that ever reduce the police budgets. The things that the current legislature has done to tie the hands of the police is a serious problem, and that needs to be changed. The police, the morale of the police is terrible right now. If you were to go out and talk to any rank and file police, the complaints they have about the laws that they have now passed that restrict the police from many things. and it shows how unknowing they are. For instance, you're not allowed to do a neck restraint, which cuts the circulation off to the person's brain and they pass out and you handcuff them. But you are allowed to do a tasing. Tasing kills 10 times as many people per year as neck restraints killed, and the legislature is completely ignorant of that fact.
Thank you, Milan.
Yes, the state legislature should and will support the additions of those who are professionally specialized and knowing how to handle some of the crisis situations. Because as we know, I really want to take this opportunity to make sure that we all know, currently, our state, Washington State, is one of 5 states in the entire nation that have fully up and running the 988 system. For those who in crisis, who in need, beside the call 911 for police, we now have another way of calling for support. So this tied to the whole mental and behavioral health, and certainly our police, our law enforcement need to be out there and doing their work, because we need them and we need to give them all the support there is for them to do their best to protect their community. Thank you.
Al?
What Milan Tai considers support for the police is not letting them chase a suspect that they see coming out of a house during a burglary that jumps in a car and takes off. They're not allowed to chase that person. You never know, they may have killed somebody in the house, but until they know that, they cannot chase them. That's the kind of support she wants to give the police. You'll notice she never mentioned fully funding the police and keeping them funded. The police right now are demoralized with the laws that have been passed.
Thank you. We'll move to Mike next.
Innovations in our policing really goes with the progress of any society. But unfortunately, what we saw over the last 2 years with this, frankly, a very left-wing legislature, they handcuffed our police. All right. Our community is more at risk today than ever before. Murders are going through the roof. My daughter lives in Queen Anne in Seattle. It's appalling, the level of crime that she herself witnesses almost on a weekly basis. So before we can get into innovative policing tactics, we've got to remove the handcuffs from our police, restore safety, basic safety to those of us who are citizens, and then let's start looking at innovative things. But we've got to roll back some really bad laws that, frankly, you two passed over the last few years.
I'm sorry, Tana, I'm going to remind the audience to refrain from responding to our speakers. And Tana's turn.
Thank you. Just as we do in our schools, where we recognize that education is the focus, but kids need other things, same, I think, with our police, that we know when people call for help, sometimes it is the police, sometimes it's fire, and sometimes it's medical, and we should also recognize that a lot of times it's also mental health. And so having mental health people engaged with and embedded in police units makes a lot of sense to keep the communities safe, the families safe, and frankly, the police safe as well.
Mike, do you have a response?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Turning it to you, Judy.
Okay, this is question number 5, and we will have this order. It will be Tana, Mike, and then a rebuttal. Me, Lynn, Al, and then a rebuttal. Here is question number 5. The Institute of Taxation and Economic Policy says that Washington's tax system is the most regressive in the U.S., with the poorest residents paying, percentage-wise, nearly 6 times as much of their personal income in taxes as the wealthy. If elected, how would you address this? So, Tana, you are up first.
Thank you for that question. I have the honor of serving with me, Lynn, who has been working on the tax reform work group for a number of years now. And between the two of us, I don't want to steal her thunder, she has passed the Working Families Tax Credit, and I introduced the capital gains tax. because our tax system is completely upside down, and those who are the lowest income pay a higher percentage of their income than those on the upper income. And we know we still need services across our state, and we want to make sure everyone pays their fair share. In fact, if Washington State adopted Idaho's tax system, Idaho, we'd be bringing in about more than $10 billion more into Washington State. So I think this is an important thing for us to look at. It will help our businesses. It'll make it more fair for have an economy that works for everyone with a taxation system that works for everyone.
Mike?
Right, but Idaho doesn't sales tax or housing. So only in the state of Washington do we have a taxation system where a high earner moves into the state and they bring in 200 to 300% of their first year's salary of taxes into the state of Washington, only because of our tax system. The Institute of Taxation and Policy, frankly, is a fraud organization. There's only a narrative. There's no audit to anything they're saying. As a home builder or real estate developer, I see the taxes that come in. When we build a house or a new business, sales tax is charged and everything. Excise tax is charged 3 times. Matter of fact, the excise tax in this state has almost doubled, even on affordable housing. I know I build in basically the lower level of housing inside the city of Seattle. Because of our taxation, we bring an enormous amount of taxes. The best way to improve our taxation is to increase the speed of permitting, and then the sales tax can roll in faster and faster and faster, and we build our economy instead of being regressive. Thank you.
Tana? Rebuttal?
Sorry, my mic wasn't working for a sec. So just to continue on the issue of a regressive tax system, that really hurts our creativity. It hurts our small businesses. It holds people back from contributing to the economy and to small businesses and their own advancement. And I think that as we look to switch our tax code around, that's going to help both business, it's going to help families, our communities, and our revenues, which will be flow right back into our communities.
All right, thank you. Mylin?
Thank you. Sometimes it's really not fair to be a junior. Again, I guess +1 to what my seatmate have shared earlier. Yes, I have such an honor to prime sponsor and eventually passed the Working Families Tax Credit legislation that has been in the book on the shelf for 13 years. And what else that I'm really proud of our work is not only recognizing that our upside down tax system that ask people like you and I who are working to provide for the family to pay more than those who make so much more. And I couldn't help but imagine the possibilities of when we can resolve and change the upside down tax structure, we can provide so much more services, including mental health services for our kiddos.
All right, Al?
I think the question was what more could be done to reduce tax burdens for lower income people. And I think what we need to do is consider no sales tax on clothes and other basic necessities. That occurs in other states. In our state, we pay sales tax on underwear, but candy we don't pay sales tax on. That's a little ridiculous. We need to reduce or eliminate fees for state parks, car tabs, and the reason on all of the above why it helps lower income people is for somebody like myself or Mylin, those fees, those taxes are nothing. But for a lower income person, that's a significant portion of their income and should be a no-brainer for both sides of the aisle to get rid of those taxes. As far as an income tax goes, it's against our state constitution. You'd have to change the constitution unless they find judges that are on the take that want to change it without changing the constitution. It's been voted down by the people over and over, yet the 2 legislatures up here now want to override the people's vote.
All right, Mylin, rebuttal?
I'm good, thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you all very much, all of the candidates, for answering our questions, our prepared questions. At this time, we will wrap up this portion of the candidate forum with questions that we have posed for you. So now, candidates, you will have 1 minute to respond to your challenger's question. So we will start with Tana. Please begin with your question for Mike.
Mike, you are running as an election integrity candidate, and in your opening remarks, you mentioned that a school board election you thought was fraudulently won by a left-winger. And I'm wondering if you would share if you believe that President Biden is our president, and if Jay Inslee is our governor, and if not, who are our president and governor at this moment?
So I wish I knew. I mean, I watched my dear friend Wendy Guerra's supposed recount on her re-election. It's a complete fraud. We were not, it was a close election. Difference was by less than half of a point. And all you're able to see is a computer image of a computer screen that could easily be hacked. Here in the state of Washington, the largest hack of computers in our state history, we lost $1 billion 2 years ago from computer fraud. All right, the largest attack in the credit card companies here in the United States was done by one person, a city of Seattle resident, and everything's on our website, eiwa.vote. I'm afraid we don't have a system that we can verify. We can't trust it. And frankly, Tanya, I did a lot of doorbelling 2 years ago. I really don't see where the votes come from for you two, because you certainly weren't behind the thousands of doors that I knocked on 2 years ago. I'm really concerned about our election system here in this state.
All right, Mike, your question for Tana.
Tanya, I'm a home builder, and I feel I have led the industry in Build Green process. I built the first LEED certified office building in the city of Bellevue's history. I was an inaugural member of the Build Green Seattle Master Builders 22 years ago. You yourself have been passing on a lot of new regulations, which of course continue to drive up the cost of housing. And part of that is electrification of our housing. I'm wondering, have you yourself electrified your home and abide by the new low carbon regulations that you yourself support in your own home?
Thank you for building LEED certified. I served when I joined the legislature on the State Building Code Council and was thrilled to help usher in policies to ensure that we did start to add electrification charging stations for vehicles in anticipation of more electric vehicles, that we put in water bottle filling stations when we had more than one drinking fountain, a whole host of issues like that to make sure that our buildings were more green, because climate change is here and the built environment leads the most to climate change in addition to transportation. So I think it's very important that we have these policies to make our buildings more green. I have not had the opportunity to turn my home into a more electrified building, to answer directly your question.
I'll give you a quote on that.
All right, okay.
I like it.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right, thank you. So, Mei-Lin, do you have a question for Al?
I do. Thank you very much for the opportunity to ask the question. So Al, thank you for running and the willingness to serve the 41st District. You and I had a primary, and we were on a Zoom call with the Seattle Times. And at that time, many of what we've heard today, as you shared about the passage of legislations and how, in your mind, it didn't support our law enforcement officers. And those who interview us have shared with you multiple of your idea was, in fact, incorrect. Have you have a chance to do some of your own fact check?
That was a confusing word salad question. As far as fact checks go, the laws are the laws. What I've said about Bill 1054, are you questioning that? Because you better read the law. I have it with me here if you want to see it. anyone else wants to see it here about the laws of police not being able to pursue. So I'm not sure if that was your question, but yes, I've read the law and I have it. And afterwards I can show it to you and you can tell me where I'm reading it wrong. Maybe you've never read it. Maybe you just approved it.
All right, then, Al, your turn. A question for Milin.
Sure. Lynn, the reason a lot of the homeless that are drug addicts are on the streets is because even family does not want a drug addict in their house. My wife has a friend named Linda, whose son was homeless and a drug addict for 10 years. He died in the streets a couple of months ago. What would you tell Linda was the reason why you would rather see her son die in the streets from drugs rather than make hard drug possession a felony again, so the homeless drug addicts could be forced into treatment and return to the homes of family once they are drug-free?
Thank you so much for the questions, and I want to extend my condolence to your friends who lost a son. I don't think any of us would really want to be put in the positions where our own children have to pass before us. So my sincere condolence. In some of those languages, we're looking at how do we improve our involuntary treatment. There's several assumptions, I think, and I would love to understand more in your question. The assumption number one is that all of the people who are homeless are drug addicts. I do not think that is the case. I am working to ensure that those who need supported hands the 988. If there are somebody who need medical attention, who need mental support, should get the services, homeless or not.
All right, Nina.
Thank you. These were your closing remarks, and I just want to thank you, candidates. Thank you for agreeing to come tonight and for agreeing to serve as Issaquah at the state legislature in the past or in the future. And our residents are lucky to have you. Good luck to each of you as you complete your campaigns over the next month.
We will now take a short break while we prepare to
Well,
meet the candidates.
As short as possible.
As
Judy,
short as
because we're
possible, I know.
behind
We
schedule.
are behind by a minute or two, so thank you all, and good luck. Okay, all right.
Let's meet the candidates for the position of the King County District Northeast Division Judge, Mr. Mike Finkel and Mr. Joshua Scher. This forum will be shorter, just for 20 minutes. Let's remind everyone that the candidates for judge cannot discuss how they will rule on a specific matter, so our questions will be directed more at judicial philosophy and background. However, we will use the same format as we used earlier. Also, to keep a friendly tone, we are going to use first names. Mike, do you like Mike or Michael?
I usually go by Mike, but
Mike's good.
either one.
That's what I got. Mike and Joshua, would you each like to begin? Josh, I always called you Joshua. I just can't change.
I'll probably call him Josh.
Okay, we'll go with Josh. You have 2 minutes for your introductory comments. We'll start with Mike.
Okay. Hi, I'm Judge Mike Finkel. I've been your judge for about the last 12 and a half years. I'll talk fast. I have 6 ratings of exceptionally well qualified by 6 independent bar associations. I have 1 rating of well qualified. I have support from both King County Democrats and King County Republicans, and endorsement of the Seattle Times. Since 2012, I put together our Veterans Court. I was appointed to chair the statewide committee that does the forums for forensic mental health matters. I've presented at the National Judicial College on mental health courts and Veterans Court. In 2019, I put together our youth court. 2020, I took it virtual because of the pandemic. 2021, we expanded it, I brought another judge on board, expanded it 5-fold, so it now has 5 jurisdictions instead of 1. In 2022, I became president of the Statewide Youth Court Association. There was a major overhaul of the protection order statutes, so I put together a policy for us to comply with it, for our court to comply. I was appointed to the committee that does the forms for all courts statewide that do protection orders. I trained about 60 judges and lawyers on it. I also published an article on forensic mental health issues and commitment based on mental illness. I also trained about 120 judges on mental health issues. I also work deeply with the YMCA mock trial program I coach. I also convene or host the district championships, and I also serve as a judge and a rater, and I've done about 12 to 14 reference letters. I serve as a mentor through the Joint Minority Mentorship Program, and I also am part of the Pathways Advisory Committee through the Issaquah School District. Thank you.
Josh, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much for having us here this evening, and good evening to members of the viewing public. My name is Joshua Scher. I'm running for judge in the King County District Court Northeast Division. I live right here in Issaquah with my wife and 3 children. I've been an Eastside resident since 1988, and I work representing state agencies and colleges, and I also serve as a judge pro tem, filling in Eastside courts on the bench. I served for 8 years here on this very dais as a twice-elected Issaquah City Council member. In fact, ironically, Mike, you're in my old seat. You know, I'm so proud of. Well, and I'd like to have this one too. That's why I'm running. So, you know, I'm not going to tout all the things I did from 2008 to 2015 on the council, because I'm proud of the team that we had under the leadership of Mayor Freisinger, Mayor Butler after her, and the wonderful city council members who I work with. And I would argue we got through the Great Recession in probably the best shape of any city in the region, and we did it without raising your property taxes. I'm so proud of that. You know, my entire career has been built on service. I'm a proud Kiwanian. I promise to do more for the club here in Issaquah once this campaign is over and I don't have to campaign in the evenings. I've coached youth sports. I've served on the mock trial team and as a judge. And I've been a member of the Bellevue College Foundation as well. You know, I've spent 21 years of legal practice doing both civil and criminal law. I've argued 5 times in the state Supreme Court, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals many times, and each division of the Washington State Court of Appeals. I have the background and experience and the temperament to be your judge on the district court. And I will work hard every single day to run an efficient courtroom, to hold repeat offenders accountable, and to get individuals connected with appropriate community-based services. Again, my name's Joshua Scher. I ask for your vote as judge. Thank you very much.
His badge says manufactured by Rotary Club, just saying.
All right, thank you both very much for your introductory remarks. We're going to start off with the first question. The first respondent will be Mike, and then Josh, followed by the rebuttal. Your first question is, describe your ability to create an atmosphere which promotes due process in the courtroom.
All right. I do that every single day. Whenever I have a calendar, currently I'm on a civil rotation. And for example, today I had small claims in the morning and I had protection order cases in the afternoon. I had a case this morning where the party was just, they were going to lose because they didn't have the proof. I spent a good deal of time explaining the process to them beforehand. I took all of their evidence. I gave them chances to give me everything that they had to make sure that whatever decision I made was going to be the right one. I explained what the decision points were. I explained what my decision was, why I was making the decision. I explained why I understood their situation, but I explained what the law was. I did the same in the afternoon when it came to a very hotly contested protection order matter, and I always go over what the legal standards are, and it kept them from getting upset when I did give the opinions.
Josh?
Thank you. Due process at its core requires a notice and opportunity to be heard. That's in fact the legal definition. And so when we have people that come to the court for various types of cases, whether it be criminal or civil matters, we have to make sure that they've been told when their court date is and that they're going to appear. And sometimes it's appropriate to impose conditions on them while their case is pending to ensure that they come back. And there's a lot of folks who they've never made a mistake before in their life, and I take their word for it, and I make sure that they promise on the record they're going to come back to court. But there's other people that have a rap sheet a mile long, and it's appropriate in those situations to hold people in custody while the case is pending in order to ensure that they have that notice to come back to court and they're not going to just abscond from the jurisdiction. I mean, I agree with what he said about explaining to people very carefully what occurs in the court so that people understand what's going on. And again, I would work hard every single day to make sure that our court system is run as efficiently and cost effectively as possible.
Okay, a rebuttal? Mike?
I think that Josh explained things pretty well. One of the things I do, they're very small things. I get people's names right. I learn how people with double last names are going to pronounce them. I learn phonemes. X in Chinese is sh. I make sure I do that because people smile when you get their names right. I talk to people. Sometimes that ticks off their attorneys, but if you talk to people, you establish a rapport. When you establish a rapport, they have much more confidence in what you do. So that's one of the added things that I do that I don't think a lot of judges actually spend the time to do.
Thank you. Question number 2, we'll start with Josh, then to Mike, and then back to a rebuttal opportunity for Josh. Question number 2 is, how do you strive to be consistent?
That's extremely important to me. Judges, you heard the last group of folks who were up here who are running for the state legislature. That's not what a judge does. Judges don't make the laws, judges enforce the laws. And being consistent in the application of how those laws are enforced on a day-to-day basis is extremely important, not just to the individuals who come before the court, but also the attorneys who represent their clients in the court. The city prosecutor, the defense attorneys, they want to have an expectation that there's going to be fair justice in the courtroom. And so it's extremely important to me to always be consistent, always be thorough, always be prepared. Anyone who served with me here in Issaquah knows I read those large agenda packets, sometimes 1,000 pages to prepare for our meetings so that we could make sure we get the right result. Judges have to try to bat 1,000 every single time to make sure we get a fair, honest, right, just result.
Mike, your turn.
One of the things that I have done this year is I had proposed that we have at our annual conference that we get a roundtable of just civil judges. And then what we're going to do next year and the 2 years after that is work on getting consistency, not just within our court. Can I get a pause for a second? Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. A little 5 seconds there. Thank you.
Okay. So Mr. Scheer was just saying that was his car.
I'm used to that.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. We've known each other a long time, so. So that when a civil attorney says, well, I've turned in this form of motion and it works in Spokane, it really will or won't work in Spokane. So that statewide, because a lot of our business is garnishment and debt collection, so that it will be consistent and we can decide as a group, this is how we want to do it. This is how we all think the law should be interpreted. And we can then have our orders go along similar lines. And that makes it easier on the people who are litigating, even if they're pro se's.
Thank you. Josh, do you have a response?
Every time that goes off, it just
Sorry. So sorry. Here we go.
That's when I'm on
I
warranty.
know.
And so
Oh.
it goes off. I got a warrant call. Yeah, thank you.
Josh, you may respond.
Thanks, Nina. We have known each other a long time, and so but I'm still going to have to say something fairly negative here, because you can be consistently good or consistently not good on the bench. And one thing that I think sets us apart is that my opponent had the largest number of scores in a recent bar survey for poor and unacceptable in judicial decision-making and courtroom administration. And I pledge to you that as your next King County District Court judge, you'll never see me at the bottom of the pack. I'm going to be thorough, prepared, consistent, and fair to everyone who comes before me in the court.
All right, for this next question, it will be Mike, Josh, yep, and then the rebuttal. So here is the question. We are all human. Can you give an example of a mistake that you have made and how you try to reconcile that error so that it does not happen again? Mike? Mike, could you please turn on your mic? Thank you.
Mr. Scheer filed his paperwork to run for judge with the Public Disclosure Commission on February 24, filed it on February 25 with a TBD, to be determined. Friends kept saying he's not going to run against you. I did not go far enough on getting ready to run. And so he wound up running against me, maybe for that reason, maybe not. He's the only one that knows why he ran against me. I will tell you that survey that he talked about, he could be at the bottom, because if I lose the election, I could choose next time around to get 30 lawyers and give him all ones. He'll be at the bottom. You can't trust surveys. You can trust the Bar Association ratings because they vet people, and that's where the 6 exceptionally well qualified are. If I get a chance, I'll talk more about it, but it's very deceptive. Sorry.
Josh?
I kind of honestly forgot what the question was.
It was a mistake you made that you won't make again.
Oh, right. Well, regrets I've had a few, as the chairman of the board used to say. I guess for starters, I don't regret any votes that I ever made on the city council, even though my colleagues sometimes disagreed with me, because I always had a good, honest reason behind them, why I took them. So I guess just sort of looking from a personal perspective, balancing being a city council member with being a proud parent was very difficult. And I regret not having more time for my two oldest children for those years that I served here in this room. And I wish very sincerely that I had been able to spend more time seeing them grow up. And I decided after 8 years that it was time for new ideas to come onto this council. And, I stepped aside. And I know when it's time to step aside and not run again for a seat in perpetuity.
All right, Mike, rebuttal or additional
Yes,
comment?
and I think Mr. Scheer is a very devoted parent. From everything I've seen of him over time, he is a very devoted parent. I'm just going to tell you the rest of that survey. You take exceptional and very good in the same category where I supposedly got where I got the most negatives. I was 9.5% higher than the average. For the other three categories, temperament, integrity, and virtual appearances, 8.5% to 15.5% higher than all the rest. The one dealing with running the calendars, yeah, because I will go over someone's rights every single time with them, and I don't trust attorneys to do it because that's my job.
Thank you. Okay, Judy, I'm going to go on to question number 4, where we start with Josh, and then Mike, and then a rebuttal from Josh if he chooses. Question number 4 is, what are the benefits of the therapeutic courts? Name 3 and discuss them. Starting with Josh.
In 1 minute, oh my gosh. Well, I'll start with something I said at the outset about getting people connected with appropriate community-based resources. If you get people linked up with the types of treatment they need, whether it's drug and alcohol treatment, mental health treatment, we can try to nip problems in the bud, get them off the street, and put an end to any crimes that they may be committing in the future. Number two, having a specialty court allows the court to take cases off its docket. We've had a terrible backlog in our court system over the last year or two, and having these types of specialty courts gets them out of the mainstream court docket so that the court is not jammed up with having to do, tens and hundreds of cases in a week. I was very disappointed that the county had to hire 2 commissioners at over $100,000 in salary each because the court is not able to keep up with that backlog of cases. And then I would just say third, the benefit of having those types of specialized courts is individuals who can be on hand, who know about that particular area.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Mike, your turn.
This is my home park. I spent 11 years supervising mental health court when I was a prosecutor. I presided over mental health court and veterans court. The 2 commissioners we hired came out of federal COVID funds, so I'm not sure what Josh meant about that. The backlog of cases was small claims court, so therapeutic courts mean nothing, maybe at the felony level. First thing to me is life. It gives people their lives back because it lets them become human again. Second, it can reduce crime because when people get their lives back, they can actually not come into contact with the police. And third, there's something called taking to scale. If you've ever done research, it's a concept of you take things you learn in a therapeutic court and you apply it to courts that do not involve people with mental illnesses, and that can include something like community court. So to me, those are the 3 big ones: life, reducing crime, and taking to scale.
Thank you. My opponent touts his involvement with these specialty courts, but I'll just ask the question, are we better off in terms of the crime situation than we were 12 years ago when he started with those courts? And I think the answer is no. We are not, and it's time for a change. If you believe, as I do, that our court needs change, the status quo is not going to get us there.
Thank you to both of you for answering our prepared questions. We will wrap up this portion of the candidate forum with questions posed by the candidates themselves. Candidates, you will have 1 minute to respond to your challenger's question. So, Mike, we will start with you. Please begin with your question for Josh. If you like.
We've been in enough of these together. You know what I have said about my history on the bench, and I went over it again here. With all of that in mind, what would you have done different if you had been on the bench instead of me?
One, I'm not going to be at the bottom of the ratings, poor and unacceptable for courtroom administration and judicial decision-making. And I know that because of the accolades that I've received as a judge pro tem in courts on the East Side, attorneys who tell me in the middle of proceedings how they want me to hear their cases again because I was so thorough, because I was so prepared, because I'm being so fair and so just. Number 2, I would work harder every single day. We know from when we practiced in the Seattle Municipal Court, when you worked for the city of Seattle, they used to have night court there. That doesn't require a commissioner. That doesn't require additional staffing. The judges in that court, that was just part of their job. That was part of their rotation. So work harder, work smarter, do the job to the best of my ability, day in and day out, much to my wife's chagrin, of course, because she knows that I'll be there, and that's going to take away time from our family.
Thank you. And now, Josh, your question for Mike.
There's no math in this one. Put the pen down. I'm particularly proud of my background having represent countless small businesses and individuals in civil cases and appellate cases in courts throughout the state. Can you share with us your background doing civil litigation and appellate work before you took the bench?
I did appellate work when I was with the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office. I did civil litigation when I was with the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office. I did business work, which, by the way, I hated, before I was with the LA City Attorney's Office. However, all of the work I've done for the last 12 and a half years has been in district court, You haven't done anything in district court since 2018. You've done municipal court. You've never done any of the work that a judge does in terms of working on committees, figuring out court programs, and things like that. And you will get bottom ratings because when you told me how you do sentencings, they're the same way I do them. You bragged about how you had a sentencing calendar and you took it from the morning until 2:30 in the afternoon. And that's exactly the type of thing that got them saying that I can't run a calendar. Now, I think you did it right, and I think I did it right. But if you do it the same way I do, you're going to get the same bottom ratings.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you both, and thank you, Kathy. Let's have a round of applause for our judge candidates.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good luck to each of you as you complete your campaigns over the next month.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina. Thank you to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
We will now prepare to meet the candidates for 5th Legislative District Representative.
So please come up to the dais. Those of, I see you in the audience there, and Kathy will get you seated. While we're waiting for them to come up, what's the deadline for voting, Judy?
It's November 8th. You must have your ballot in a drop box or in the mail by 8 p.m. that evening.
Hey, you know, talking about the ballot, you could mail in your ballot as early as you like, and you can track your ballot's progress through the process. You just go to the King County Elections website and check and see how your ballot is doing. Take off the bottom tab of your tab. It's a tearaway. It has a number on it, and that's what your tracking number is.
Thanks, Nida. Let's meet our next set of candidates who are seeking to represent the 5th Legislative District in the state legislature. The candidates for position 1 are Bill Ramos and Ken Moninsky, and the candidates for position 2 are Lisa Callan and Chad Magendas. In order to keep the forum as friendly, as we mentioned earlier, we will only use first names going forward. We will begin our 2-minute opening statements from Bill and Ken, followed by Lisa and Chad. Bill, you may start with your 2-minute opening statement.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having this forum. I believe it's the first one we've had live this year. So it's a pleasure to be with everybody and be able to talk about issues. So thank you very much. I'd like to talk about a little bit of work that we've done. I've been humbled and honored to be a representative of this district for the last 4 years, 2 terms. And I've been working very hard to keep that the work that we do representing this district as the most important thing. And doing that takes a lot of collaboration. I have a wonderful seatmate in Representative Callan, and we work together on many things to help bring those about. And that is just what it's about in the legislature. Working together, listening, getting people to collaborate. And I'm very proud of the fact that most of my bills are bipartisan. This last session, every one of my bills was bipartisan. And the Republicans were the first ones to sign on to my bill after it's been presented. And that's been very important to me, to work across the aisle, to listen to folks and see what's important. I know when I started back in 18, one of the biggest issues here was Highway 18. Every city we have was an issue, Highway 18, how do we fix that? And I'm very happy to say that a month ago, we had the groundbreaking for the construction of fixing Highway 18, that it will start now and hopefully soon. It'll take a little while to build, but we will have a 4-lane divided highway for the rest of Highway 18, which will be safe and stop the deaths that have occurred with head-on collisions. And that whole package that we passed, the transportation package, has been a wonderful piece of work that really is going to help this state over the next 16 years. We've always listened to our mayors, our city council folks, everybody we listen to and say, what are your priorities? We sit down and listen to them, line them up, and try to get the things that are needed for our constituents and our local municipalities. And that's how I would do the job. Thank you very much.
Ken?
I think Bill has an advantage over me. He's probably run this equipment before. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I kind of feel like I have the distinction up here on the dais of being the only non-politician. My name again is Ken Moninsky. I'm a 12-year resident of Maple Valley, Washington. I'm a husband and a father of 2 young daughters that attend public schools. I'm a small business owner. I run a couple of aviation-related businesses. I do business around the world, but I still have to make a payroll every 2 weeks. So I'm very aware and impacted by many of the decisions that come out of Olympia from what I consider to be, you know, kind of a single-party run operation down there. And every 2 years, because I ran in 2020, every 2 years, Democrats come before us. They talk about the things that unite us, like Highway 18, and don't talk too much about what divides us. So there's a lot of things that unite us. I just wish they would go back to Olympia and vote on those shared values. I'm running because the Democrat caucus in the House has doubled down on policies that I don't believe are good for the 5th District. They talked about police reform, and instead we're dealing with high rates of property and violent crime because they've tied the hands of law enforcement. We had a $15 billion surplus, and none of it was given back as relief to taxpayers or help to small business. Instead, it was spent more on larger government. And furthermore, we had a transportation bill, which my opponents talked about, which was rammed through without bipartisan support. And it contains all kinds of funding gimmicks that are going to make it harder for vulnerable people to make ends meet. It's time to put policy over ideology and deal with the many issues left orphaned by the Democrats. We can do better for our families, our children, our first responders by bringing back balance and change to Olympia. Thank you.
All right, Lisa?
Thank you very much to Issaquah TV that gets to host this and replay it, and certainly to the American Association of University Women, Issaquah Kiwanis. It really is an honor to be able to talk to the public about our service, and really appreciate all of my folks up here that are willing to serve and put their time in and to do that. So I'm Lisa Callan. I started this journey volunteering in our schools, being deeply committed in community, volunteering and advocating in a lot of spaces. But as I jumped into, coming from a family of educators, jumped into our local schools in the Issaquah School District, saw where I could bring some of my expertise, certainly in engineering and systems thinking and that background to really serve our kids in a deeper way. And so I ran for the school board, and from there have moved on to the state legislature, where you know that around 50% now with the changes in the budget is dedicated to our educating our children and our families. I came to the Northwest to begin with because of Boeing, and jumped right into software development and engineering design and development. And the Northwest is a great place to be. This is where I chose to build my family, to raise my son, and to come to this space. And as your state representative, and I get very passionate and very humbled by the opportunity to serve all of you and making sure that we're staying deeply connected in community and listening to you and what you need to be represented, how you want to be represented in Olympia. When you do that, you stay out of partisanship. When you do that, you're solving problems for you. You're solving problems for your neighbor. You're solving problems for our communities, our schools, and our businesses. And that's where I've been working to stay focused. So I serve on children, youth, and families, education, and the capital budget, which is a strong bipartisan budget, as vice chair. And I look forward to continuing to dive deep and making sure that we're doing what we need to do for you.
Thank you, Lisa. Chad?
Well, thank you so much for having me back here. It's a familiar position, even if it's been a few years. I'm also running for my 3rd term in the State House. I served from 2013 to 2017. I was ranking member of the House Education Committee. I was on the Technology and Economic Development Committee and the Appropriations Committees. Before that, I was in the Navy when I first came out here, and I was 12 years in the Navy as a nuclear submarine officer, but I've been living on Tiger Mountain for almost 30 years now, where I spent 20 years working at Microsoft, also engineering and software development. But I got involved also as an engaged parent and a PTA outstanding advocate. I became president of the school board, and then I got basically called down to Olympia to serve in a larger scope. And it has been very rewarding. But I had the fortune of working in Olympia that had bipartisan control. We had a bipartisan legislature. We had to work together to find common ground. And as tough as that was sometimes, we ended up with a much better work product because of it. We actually were passing budgets with over 90% support because we took the time to find the common ground and pass something that we could all agree on. And what brought me back to run again is because I don't believe that's happening anymore. I think one-party rule has not been healthy for Olympia or the state. You see transportation packages being passed with no Republican projects, and effectively, almost half of our state is disenfranchised right now. So I really want to see a return to a cooperative, coalition-type government where people work together to find that common ground. Since leaving the legislature, I've actually had a chance to eat my own dog food, which is a term we have at Microsoft, and I've been exercising many of the bills that I worked on. So aside from the school funding, which I'm kind of known for, I passed a whole bunch of computer science education bills, alternative routes to certification. I took those paths myself and got my master's degree from Central Washington University and been a full-time teacher. This is my 4th year in the Bellevue School District as a computer science teacher. So I'm anxious to be back and take the lessons I've learned from being in the trenches now to refine a lot of the policy work that I did back when I was in Olympia.
Thank you, Chad. At this time, Nina will start with the questions.
Great, thanks, Judy. And I want to remind you that it's 1-minute responses from the first person and the second person, and then the first person gets an opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal. So in this first round, and we have you ordered differently each time. The first time, it's Bill starts, then Ken, then Bill gets the opportunity to do a 30-second rebuttal, then Lisa and Chad with their 1-minute answers, and then goes back to Lisa for a possible 30-second rebuttal. The first question is, what kind of relief measures, if any, would you support as schools work through the long-term impacts of the pandemic? So this goes to Bill first.
Thank you for that question. And the most important thing, I think, with the school districts is the ability that they have local control. We have to fund them, but we have almost 300 school districts in this state, and they're all very different from a school enrollment size of probably around 10 kids to, tens of thousands. And so that's very important that we add funding and in the area, and we'll give guidelines, but we try to really not prescribe specific projects so that they have the ability to adjust it to their local school district. That is probably the most important thing I feel that we do, is keep that local control. It's different here in Issaquah than it is in Ritzville or Silton County. Thank you.
Ken, your turn.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to hear my opponent talk about local control. It sure does feel like we have a lot of mandates that come down from Olympia when it comes to our children's education, and I certainly support local control. I wish we could see more of it, more involvement and input from our parents. We do have an issue with leaving our children behind because the schools were shut down for so long. The federal government has stepped in with a lot of money, a lot of which is still, to my knowledge, unspent. So there are a lot of funds waiting in the wings to have us deal with this. And what it's going to take is an effort and a focus to get our kids educated by focusing on the core subjects and not get sidetracked by other issues that it seems like Olympia tries to force upon our school districts. So spend the money we have, and let's focus on the core subjects, reading, writing, arithmetic, and try and get our kids caught up so our numbers aren't so poor.
Thank you, Bill. Do you have a response? Next, it's Lisa, 1 minute.
Thank you. Certainly, it was very challenging times for our school districts, for our families, for our children during the pandemic, and there's a lot that needs to be done. Our kids some of our kids lost ground, some of our kids actually did better. Some of our children, certainly in the early learning spaces, that didn't have access to any preschool or aren't going to be kindergarten ready. This is a multi-year, long-term. There is federal relief money that's out there that's being paced because school districts this is one-time money. They're working to figure out how to dial that in. But specifically for relief measures, I think what we really have to focus in on is the complex needs of each child and where they are, meet the child where they are in this moment, and take a pathway that's going to get them back on their developmental milestones to make sure that they can graduate and be successful and move forward in that direction. And that means we're paying attention to our special education students. That means we're paying attention to those that have struggled with behavioral health and mental health. That means we're also paying attention to the differentiation within the classroom and bringing skills and tools to the classroom to make sure that we can make that happen.
Thank you. Chad?
So I don't think funding is the issue here. As one of the lead negotiators for the McCleary solution, we doubled school funding from the state over 8 years. So we are actually 5th in the nation as far as state funding for schools, and we'd be up to 3rd if we just had another $109 per student. So I just want to emphasize how significant the issue is. In English, percentage of students being standard, we dropped from 60% to 48%, but in math, we dropped from 49% all the way down to 30.4%. And so we've got a lot of distance to make up. Now, there has been a little bit of rebound. We're up to 38% in math, but we still have to recognize we've got a major issue here, and we need to make it a priority. So getting back to basics, that's a great start, but I think we have to have an objective measure of whether a child is meeting standard, just like we do for reading in 3rd grade. We don't let them go on to the next grade until they are actually can prove that they're meeting standards, because they're not serving them by letting that snowball longer and longer.
Thank you, Lisa. Do you have a 30-second response?
I do. I think that when we talk about relief measures, it doesn't necessarily mean tons more money coming in. It does talk about being accountable to the dollars that are coming to the table and putting them in the right place at the right time. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm also, it doesn't mean, from my perspective, that we have hard, rigorous standards. We have standards, absolutely, on developmental matters, which is driven by science and our understanding about how brains develop and how we grow and learn. But it's really important to know that you can master concepts and you can develop and move on that pathway in a different rate if you're a child, depending on how you're dosing and bringing in that support and help. So
Thank
that's
you,
what we need
Lisa.
to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For our next question, this is the order. It'll be Ken, Bill, and then Ken with your opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal. Chad, Lisa, and then Chad with your 30-second rebuttal. This question comes from the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. We're facing a shortage of mental health professionals, so it's really challenging for people in crisis to find care when they need it. How would you address the mental and behavioral health workforce shortage? Ken?
Thanks. Yeah, I think this is a problem being faced all over the country. It's probably not germane just to Washington State. One of the things that I've talked about in regards to mental health is this idea of being able to push mental health services out directly to the residents that need it the most. So we're talking about, smaller community-based clinics. It is going to require some funding. I support funding to push those services out, provided that we are reaching the people that we need to. The other issue with mental health seems to be this idea of kind of the carrot and stick, and that if we're going to make an investment in mental health services, we need to make sure that we're able to see some results and see some of the behavioral changes I think that the public will expect from the increased funding. I think it's going to be a challenge for staffing for some time, given the state of the economy, but I think a start would be changing the paradigm under which we deliver those services.
Thank you. Bill?
Thank you. Yes, we do have a shortage in workforce in this industry as well as many others. We have started a few years ago in the legislature to change that. We have added a new school and hospital teaching facility at the University of Washington that will have 400 beds and be a teaching facility so that we can get more folks trained. We've added more instructors in our community colleges to get more folks trained in medical field and counseling and so forth. So we've been adding workforce and teaching and instructors in this field for a couple of years. It's, again, going to take a while to get all those folks qualified. We do want very qualified people to be working in these jobs. So it is taking time, but we've started that a few years ago, and it is starting to show fruition. I know a constituent that just said that told me their son was so excited about this that he has entered into the field to get his counseling certificate and work there. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Ken, 30-second response?
Yeah, I just want to say real quickly, you know, the mental health services for youth, I think, has been a big shortcoming in the state. And we hear of parents that can't place, especially teenage kids, into services. I think this needs to be an area of renewed focus so that we can kind of intervene in these situations before somebody moves on into adulthood when they may become homeless and have other issues that are prolonged throughout their life.
Thank you. Chad?
So one of the things we did when we were on the school board is we had a partnership with Swedish to place teen mental health counselors. These are actually trainees. They were part of a program that was part of Swedish, and we replaced them in all of our high schools and eventually all of our middle schools as well. So early intervention is a big advantage here. And when we can get trainees, real-world experience out in the field, that's going to help their training program, and there's kind of a mutually beneficial thing going on there. The other thing is, I don't think we can entirely decouple mental health issues with substance abuse issues. You see this especially in the homeless population. Usually it's a combination of the two, and they're very closely related. And so when we look at our homeless services, I'd really want to make sure that we're requiring participation in the appropriate programs, mental health, substance abuse, or both, to take advantage of those services. Because right now, you know, we're buying hotels, we're putting homeless people in them, and yet there's no requirement at all to participate in those programs. And so we need to ensure that our services are providing a transition, a temporary safety net to move them on to the next step.
Lisa?
Well, I was really pleased to hear Ken talk about putting a renewed focus on this energy and this effort around creating a deeper workforce of behavioral health, because that's exactly what I've been doing while I've been in the legislature. I have the great honor of chairing the state's Children and Youth Behavioral Health Work Group, which has 5 subcommittees on it, which focuses on perinatal to age 5, school-based behavioral health, youth and young adult behavioral health, workforce and rates, and behavioral health integration into primary care. And every year, we go through a significant stakeholder effort, reaching over 300 people inside the meeting structure and formats, besides going out into community and making sure that we're getting a voice of those who are actually experiencing the behavioral health community, receiving services as well as those providing it, as well as our state agencies, to make sure that we're really building that out. So there's several steps that we've taken, including figuring out and working with philanthropy on how to build out our loan forgiveness programs and our scholarship programs, making sure that we're addressing the bottlenecks around licensing and so much more. I'm very anxious to talk to you about.
Thank you, Lisa. Chad, 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you, because we have so many good questions. Okay. The next question is question number 3. We're going to start with Lisa, go to Chad, and then the response to go back to Lisa, Bill, then Ken. Question number 3 is, RCW 9.02 describes access to abortions in Washington State. What is your position on this law? We are starting with Lisa.
Thank you very much. I am 100% pro-choice. I want to make sure that women have the right to choose what happens to their body. They make those decisions with those they choose to have involved in those decisions. And we stand strong in the positions that Washington currently has, as was voted in by the initiative of the people, certainly is the majority position of the state, and making sure that we're carrying that forward. There is every year in the legislature, there's legislation brought forward that is working to reduce access. The other key piece that we have to really pay attention to is access to these services, not only making it legal and available, but access. We have a very narrow ownership of our hospitals that can dictate and want to make sure that we're not preventing access when women need a choice, when their care is in deep, dire straits, that they can actually make the choices and get the services they need, especially in the hospital setting.
Thank you. Chad?
I'm also pro-choice. I was endorsed by Planned Parenthood in my last re-election. I served on the National Planned Parenthood Republican Advisory Board, trying to make this a nonpartisan issue. I was the only Republican to vote for the Reproductive Parity Act. I think I did it 3 times. So yes, we agree on this issue. Where I draw the line is I would like to see a little bit more parental involvement when it comes to reproductive health decisions in the schools. Right now, a lot of parents are losing any knowledge or consent in that process, and I'd like to see that if we're going to set a age of majority, that it should be consistently applied.
Thank you. Lisa, any response?
Certainly, I am the endorsed candidate by Planned Parenthood in this election and have been also endorsed by Pro-Choice Washington and have been supported in my previous elections by Emily's List. And so I carry that with me, and you will see how I'm carrying that forward to make sure that everybody that is involved around reproductive health and sexual health has the science that they need to make sure that they're making the choices that they need to for themselves.
Thank you. Bill, 1 minute.
Thank you. I will start also with the fact that I am the endorsed candidate from both Pro-Choice Washington and Planned Parenthood. I absolutely believe in a woman's right to complete health care. That is fundamental to their health and well-being, and that must remain in place. I am also concerned with access. Even though things may be legal, that doesn't mean you can get them. And I am concerned with some of the hospitals and some of the service providers in our state that are not providing full access for women. And that is an important piece for me to make sure that access is there and not just legality.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, I'm pro-life. I want every child that comes into this world to be conceived in love, brought into this world and raised by two loving parents. That's what I think the goal should be for everybody. I've dealt personally with this issue. My late wife had a chronic illness where a pregnancy could have ended her life, and we've had to have that difficult conversation. The voters, I think, have spoken pretty clearly on this issue, and I don't see there to be any kind of a big push or move to change it. I would be interested to hear what the Democrats want to do with Governor Inslee's proposal to have an amendment. No one's really said where they want to set that marker at. Is it going to stay at 24 weeks where it is now, or is it going to go till right up until the point of birth? And I think that's an important question that nobody has been challenged on. But Republicans typically don't overturn the will of the people, as we haven't done on a number of issues.
Bill, do you have a response?
Yes. Just a reminder that every year there has been multiple proposals to make abortions and full health care for women illegal. That is coming every year from the Republican Party, and we have to fight that back every year. So it's not a given in this state, because those can change. It's a law, and it can change very easily.
Right, for our next question, it will be Chad, Lisa, and then back to Chad, Ken, Bill, and then back to Ken. So our question is, to what degree should the legislature determine how much and where housing should go?
So I'm not a big fan of top-down edicts coming from Olympia. I really believe that local control should be the priority when it comes to zoning. I think local communities are going to know the best trade-offs, and I think it needs to be a conversation that local communities have with their development communities as well, because we've put a lot of barriers up against development right now. We've made it very difficult, very expensive for developers to come here, and we're running out of developable land, honestly. The Growth Management Act that was enacted in the early 1990s was well-intentioned, but we haven't really measured its success and found out which of the policies are actually contributing to the long-term goals of the program. I think it's time to go back and look at that Growth Management Act and see if we can loosen the restrictions for local communities to make zoning decisions rather than tighten them.
Lisa?
I appreciate the question. It's certainly a big conversation that we've had. We had legislation that didn't make it across the line as we were continuing to try to struggle with how do we support local control and also meet the needs that we need in the state for housing, especially the inequities in housing that we see. There was a recent report that came out of the Department of Commerce that talked about, in particular for Black and brown families of color in Washington state, and the tremendous deficit that they're in compared to anyone else in the state. I think from my perspective, working on the capital budget, one of the big tactics that we've been moving forward and that I continue to support is to figure out how to work across three areas. One is how do you increase supply? How do you stabilize existing affordable housing? And then how do you work to bring incentives through subsidies? So we've been funding the Housing Trust Fund. We've been restoring the Public Works account. We've established a new grant category specifically to bring in some of the federal dollars to help cities work through infrastructure to connect to affordable housing. This is an incentive
Thank you,
program
Lisa.
that makes it happen.
Right.
Thank
Chad?
I'd like to point out that this affects not just homes, but also businesses and schools. When I was chair of the school siting joint committee, we looked at the cost of siting a school inside the urban growth boundary, and it's 10 times more. It's just insane, because we have to go and buy a whole bunch of higher value property and evict people from their property using eminent domain in order to get enough property to actually put a school. And so a lot of the restrictions that are in place from those state mandates from the early 90s really need to be revisited.
Ken?
Yeah, I want to emphasize a couple things that were brought up. Number one, the housing issue, it is primarily a supply issue. And if we lock up all this land through the Growth Management Act, there's simply no place to build, or we price ourselves out of what private developers are going to want to pay for land in order to build and earn an adequate rate of return. And supply really dominates the housing issue. If you don't put more units of housing out there, there's no way we can bring down the cost to where lower income people, where first-time home buyers have the opportunity to go into their first home. But I think we need to do things to encourage it. What we don't need, and what we keep seeing coming out of Olympia, is increased regulations that does nothing but add additional costs to housing units. We've already seen it where they're talking about now you can't put a natural gas line into a house. And these building regulations that are going to add another $25,000 to the $50,000 that are already due to regulation. So we need to curtail that.
Thank you, Ken. Bill?
Thank you. And this is a very difficult issue. Coming from Issaquah City Council, I know that each city wants to have total control of what they're doing. But every city is in a different place. Some are working very hard to expand and make affordable housing easier. Some are not. Some, even if they're trying, it's not been successful. So I've been in collaboration with the Association of Washington Cities, all the cities in our district, and talking with them. This is how you sort through it is they need some help. And what help do they need? And that's what we should try to get to them. We haven't got an answer for that yet, but we need to keep working for that because we want to give them the help they need to get more housing. That's the simple fact. But how do we give them help and not a mandate? Because we don't want to do that. But some cities need more help than others. It's hard when you're local and if your city doesn't, your residents don't want more housing or don't want multiple family housing. How do you put that in when you know that it will just upset all your residents? So some folks need a little more help from us, and we're trying to figure out how to get that to them.
All right. Ken, 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, beware of the person that shows up at your door and says, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, right? We can use, again, kind of a carrot approach. I think that we can tie funding for transportation projects and certain things to increase density in certain areas to give cities and communities an incentive to build denser multifamily housing. I agree that a lot of communities don't want it. I know in Maple Valley, they've added a lot of units, and I think it has been a net positive for our community. So I would like to see creative incentives to, rather than a top-down mandate, to promote the additional units being built.
Thank you, candidates. Nina?
Thank you very much. We're wrapping up this portion of questions and turning to our favorite part, which is the questions posed to each one another. The candidates, you will have 1 minute to respond to your challenger's question. Bill, would you please begin with a question for Ken?
Thank you. Ken, the legislature is a very collaborative place. You have to work with a lot of people, 147 of them exactly, to get things passed. If you look on my website, I've got endorsements and support from many folks, local elected officials, community leaders, groups, environmental groups, et cetera. When I looked at your website, I didn't see any endorsements or people that are supporting you. If that is the case, how are you going to build that collaboration to get things done with the folks that are supporting you now?
Yeah, we've had a few endorsements. It's been an interesting race. As Bill and I have talked in private when we run into each other, this cycle's been a little bit strange. One of the issues is I think everybody got kind of enamored when Chad decided to run. And either they forgot about me or they're waiting for Paul Graves to walk through the door. I don't know what it is, but I have been endorsed by Association of Washington Business, by Washington Food Industry, so I have some endorsements out there. I've probably been a little remiss at getting them out on the website. I think my background as a small business owner, working with nonprofits, I bring a very collaborative nature and expect that I won't have any problem working with the Republican caucus as well as across the aisle.
Thank you. Ken, would you like to ask your question of Bill?
Sure. This is the best part, isn't it, Bill? Bill's very humble, and he didn't mention that he was endorsed by the Seattle Times. And the reason I bring that up is in the opening of that endorsement, and I'm going to paraphrase, I'm not going to get this exactly right, they referred to him as someone that likes to come across as a moderate, but can be counted on as a reliable vote for the Seattle liberal caucus. They went on to be very critical of Bill's work on the transportation bill because it didn't receive any Republican support. So I guess my question is in terms of the opening line there, what do you think they meant by that?
Well, I guess the bottom line is thank you for bringing it up, because I didn't mention it, that the Seattle Times did endorse me as what they thought the best candidate overall. They did with me as well as others think that the transportation package should have been more bipartisan. And I explained to them why that came across, but they didn't seem to buy that from me or from others. But the most important thing was that we got that transportation package passed for all the citizens of Washington. And it is across the state that we're going to work on preservation and maintenance and on the roads. That was the #1 issue that people were after. And we delivered on that, and we delivered the best way we could. And sometimes you have to do things a little differently to get them passed. And that's what we had to do. And we talked to the Republicans. They refused to negotiate with us in good faith, and that's why they weren't there at the table. But we continued to talk with them throughout the process, keep them informed, and we wish they were at the table.
Thank you. Lisa, do you have a question for Chad?
I do, thank you. I think right now, we know that the leading cause of death for our children is gun violence. And I've spent a lot of time in the legislature working through trying to figure out how we can reduce violence overall, certainly how it connects and intersects with so many of our issues around public safety, certainly around how it intersects with children's ability to learn and our families and our community's ability to thrive. So I would like to know, Chad, in your time in the legislature and now, what have you done to reduce gun violence?
So I am a strict constitutionalist. I believe in all of our amendments, including the Second Amendment. And so I believe we are constrained to some extent what we can do constitutionally when it comes to our right to bear arms. Within that constraint, I have voted for red flag laws. I proposed a budget item to actually allow people to do free background checks online with the Washington State Patrol's watch system. And I support training programs. So I actually would support a requirement that you have firearm safety training prior to your first purchase of a weapon. These are the things that I think we can practically do to reduce gun violence.
Thank you. Chad, do you have a question for Lisa?
I do. So public safety didn't come up today. I was kind of surprised it didn't. If you look at the murder rate in King County, it's up 72%. If you look at property crimes, which is basically what I hear when I'm knocking on doors, Bellevue was up 21.5%, Maple Valley up 38.3%, Issaquah 40.7%, Black Diamond 56.2%, and Snoqualmie up 61.3%. And it's hard not to make the connection between these stats and your support of the police pursuit limitations, as well as defunding the police, and the Blake fix, which effectively decriminalized hard drugs. If you get a chance to go back to Olympia, what would you do to correct these mistakes?
Thanks, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about public safety because we are hearing it in the doors, and for real good reason. We do have an increase in property crime, and we do have an increase in murder, specifically domestic violence and some gang violence across the state. These trends that we're seeing here locally are national trends as well. So the direct link to the work that we've done in the legislature, it might be a conversation about whether or not that's a direct link or not, but you could see it happening across the nation. And what I want to do and what I want to lean into and why I took the positions that I did in the legislature was to make sure that we're paying attention to how we keep everybody safe in our community, that we have standards that are the same across Washington State. So when you have a neck restraint, then we know that that neck restraint is not being taught. In fact, you're being told not to do that type of, but there's other ways and other tools in the toolbox. I think we can expand the toolbox for our police officers, including the work and funding that I did specifically to bring them more wellness training and more funding for more officers to get into the police force so we can build that. I'm hitting the stop button so I can't finish my sentence. Sorry. That dreaded stop button.
Thank you, candidates. Your service is very much appreciated. Our residents are lucky to have you. Good luck to each of you as you complete your campaigns over the next few weeks.
Thank you, Judy. And we want to thank all the candidates again for their participation in tonight's forum, those who are still in the audience and those who are here earlier. I want to remind you that the City of Issaquah IT department and staff, thank you. Those of you behind the camera have recorded tonight's forum, and it will be available to see on ICTV Channel 21. Just tune it in. It'll keep playing over and over again on some regular basis. But on demand, you can go to the City of Issaquah's YouTube site and watch it at your leisure. And you could even speed it up a little bit if you wanted to, but honestly, I would not do that.
Not fast enough.
No. Yeah, so don't forget, tell your friends to share that, and you can share it on social media or something like that and help them out.
As voters, we are reminded by world events that the precious freedom we have in participation and the freedom that we have in America, the right to vote that guarantees so many other rights, comes through our citizen participation. You can make a difference just by being an active, informed voter. Please remember to fill out your ballot and vote November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody.